Hello, my name is Jean Stanton. I'm here at the Bergstrom Mahler Museum in Neenah, Wisconsin, and I have with me my friend Jamie Sieverstadt, who is the curator of the museum. She has something she'd like to say to you, and then I'm going to get back at you.
Thank you, Jean. We're extremely pleased to have Jean's show here, not only because Jean and Tom have been longtime supporters of the museum, but also because we're really excited to present local artists to the community. And because we really haven't had anything this unique in a long time. We've never had anything quite like this in the museum, and we've had an overwhelming response with it. And the time that Jean's show has been up, since July 13th, we've had over 1,200 people visit the museum. Jean's work has been featured on Channel 5's Morning News, has had many visitors from the local arts festival, which those are people from 7 different states were here for that. So it's been a great success, and we're extremely happy to do this for you.
Thank you, Jamie. It's been a pleasure working with you. I'd like to tell you a little about this exhibit entitled Shells and Flowers. It must be called a retrospective in that it started easily 40 years ago, probably when I was a child, and that's more than 40 years, collecting seashells by the seashore. I've just always dearly loved them. Then once visiting friends on Cape Cod, I collected these shells, and my host had an old cigar box that he gave me, and out of that and a tube of glue came that and a perfectly marvelous maple frame that I think was his doing. The other two are very early ones, and also shells collected by me on the shore. The marine life, or the grasses and marine material, are mostly from Point Beach State Park over near Manitowoc. I think that was about 30 years when I got most of these. This shell, like many others that you will see as we walk around the gallery, the biggest, most complicated, colorful, and lustrous shells come from the South Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the China Sea. Many have been given to me by friends who are travelers. Others I have bought in shell shops. It's a shame we don't grow them ourselves in the North American continent, but we don't. So that's how you have to get them if you want them. And usually one big shell serves to be the inspiration for the rest of the picture. Moving on, you see the pictures are getting a little more complicated and or sophisticated, using paper leaves and ivies. I think that using these other substances must be the beginning of an abstract trend in these pictures, so that as you get over this far, the shells are mixed in with tiny figures. There's a little turtle in here. There's some crabs in another one. There also are darling little coquinas that look like butterflies that appear in almost all the pictures. They're there for themselves and their own beauty, but they very frequently cover up a drop of glue that got misplaced. I think, as you can see, as you move on, they all are getting more detailed, and I'm using different kinds of shells to make an arrangement that is pleasing and interesting, still having to do with sea creatures and sea forms. Over here on this wall, the three large pictures are my three last, and I think the three most sophisticated of the lot. The use of the coral and the other marine type life was just a joy to work with. The more things you have to do, the easier and more fun it gets. I've also found a young man in Sanibel Island, Florida, who has made these boxes for me and lined them. I used to do the whole thing myself, make the box and line them, and I can tell you this is just a whole lot easier the way that it is now. This picture, entitled Barnacle Chorus, reminds me that all these aspects of a show were new to me, having never done anything like it before. And one of them came very near the opening date when the museum executive director said, "And what are the names of the pictures?" And my husband and I had no idea of names. I didn't know how people chose them. In fact, I thought artists had a name and then did the picture, but I didn't. So we sat down and stared at these and came up with these names, and there are a few that I particularly like. Barnacle Chorus is my favorite. You see the barnacles with their mouths wide open singing. Pearly Curlicues. You can hardly resist naming something that. And the boat is actually entitled Sail Bonnie Boat. It's a mistake. It should be Speed Bonnie Boat, over the sea to sky. The other ones along this wall, this is true or false because some are cut out pieces of paper to resemble shells, a sand dollar for your thoughts, the question mark shape of the shells and of the sand dollars gave me the idea for that. Hidden treasure, if you look carefully, you see that the fish are going down looking for something. And Summer Afternoon is a great favorite just because of the colors and the old-fashioned bouquets of shells and the ones that make themselves, in the arrangements that make themselves into flowers, I was particularly fond of. On this wall, we have something called a Sailor's Valentine. This is the one that I did, a very small, humble rendition of others, mostly portrayed in this book, but also these are old ones, photographs of old ones on the wall that belong to friends of mine. The name comes from these that were reputedly made by sailors on their long voyages at sea, and they would make them and take them back to their sweeties at home, frequently writing on them, "Ever thine," "Forget me not," that sort of thing. That's why it's called Valentine, and it certainly does strike a chord in my heart. The truth of the matter is they were made by the ladies of Barbados Islands and sold to the sailors when they came into port. The sailors then did take them and take them back to their sweeties. I don't know what they told them, whether they made them or what, but that's the origin of them. The originals are doubles like this. Having done one, I could barely see straight, and my hand was shaking. I would never attempt another. It's an art form all of its own, done very beautifully by a friend of mine, Sandy Moran, in Yarmouthport, Mass. She makes these for a living, and my hat is off to her. She does a simply beautiful job. I couldn't possibly imitate her, but you should know about Sailor's Valentines if you're the least bit interested in shells, because they're a special segment, not anything like the kind of thing that I do. My husband Tom had such an interesting observation this morning. I want him to tell you about this. It sort of stuck with me. Sweetie, can you talk?
Sure. I think it's true that there's something of a shell in all of us. Shells in the ocean break up, fall to the bottom of the sea. They, with other things, eventually make limestone. Limestone gets pushed up and is in part of the ground. The ground grows plants. We eat the plants, and eventually we get calcium from seashells, at least in part. So these shells are all part of what might have been us sometime or other. This work represents many long years of very hard work on the part of my wife. and she has not only perseverance and patience, but also, as you can see, much talent in being able to invent wonderful designs from seashells. And that's why we think the seashell is such a great thing from which to devise pieces of artwork. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie. Moving on into a room where there's some paintings I've done about marine subjects and life, I'd like to point out this painting, which was on the front of the brochure that the museum sent out. It is called Abalone and Nautilus. The Nautilus part is pretty easy, and the real thing is seen there, and two small abalone shells. The abstract version that I did is meant to suggest to you the depths of the sea and the various coloring you find in the various depths as it turns from deep, deep blue to almost pale spring green. On this side is another shell that I painted for no reason except that I just fell in love with it. The real thing is here on your left, and the painting entitled Adrift at Dawn is here. You can see the sun rising and the light on the water. As we enter this room, the paintings are almost all of the sea, something to do with marine culture. The small one is for my daughter. In fact, many of them were sort of thank yous to people who very kindly returned them for this show, so I have them to be grateful for. This is a storm coming up. This was in the Bahamas. This little pen and ink was given to my granddaughter, Lucy Conklin, to thank her for a simply wonderful pen and ink and watercolor she did for me, kind of tit for tat. Over here you will see a painting entitled The Fleet's Inn. You probably see these boats out in the Neenah harbor. That post is, I believe, the Neenah Nottoway Club symbol, so that they're part of that organization, and they're there resting, waiting to go out for another sail. In this picture, you see the old entrance to this museum. It's not the original entrance, but it's two renovations back. My friend Joan Leach had a statue given in honor in memory of her husband Fred Leach that was there. And the statue came after I did the painting, so I never got a chance to put it in. But anyway, it's all gone away with the new renovation. A little needle pointer crewel work. Some white cyclamens for another daughter, and this study in blue glass has to do with this vase, which my great niece Allison Lightcap gave to me as a present, and I told her I will make a picture of it and give it back to you, and so I did, and she has lent me the picture for this show. All in all, I have to say that getting this exhibit together and mounting it has been one of the big experiences in my life. I've enjoyed every moment of it, but I couldn't possibly say goodbye without mentioning my dear friend Bill Thompson, an artist in his own right. His hand-colored photographs are world class. He has made quite a name for himself. And another young man, Michael Foley, who lives in Minneapolis, a talented graphic artist and designer. Without the help of those two, and of course my husband, I could not possibly have gotten this together. Their encouragement and enthusiasm kept me going the whole time, and I thank them all for it, and you for listening. Bye-bye.